So you might have seen these images of white South Africans being welcomed into the United States as refugees under the Trump administration.
When this executive order came out, it was around like 11 o'clock at night when the news broke in South Africa. And I just thought this was remarkable.
Well, I had just finished reporting and talking to refugees who were stuck because of the refugee suspension. So coming off of that to then seeing an executive order where, oh, wait, there is going to be exception. Oh, it's Afrikaners. That made it even more striking.
The Afrikaner, this was the people that created apartheid, right? And now suddenly they were the people who the most powerful man in the world is saying, like, are so persecuted, they get refugee status.
For me, what jumped out about this story is I almost feel like we need to step back. I cover a lot of immigration policy for our White House team. And initially, the big story here was that Trump was shuttering the refugee program. So this means now that thousands of the applicants around the world, including more than 10,000 who had already been cleared to travel and had their ticket, that they were stuck in limbo. So one of his first big actions is freezing this program, meaning that Afghans who assisted U.S. soldiers were going to be stuck, as well as various African refugees. The Congolese are a large applicant group, and they were also going to be stuck in limbo. So we have this news that he's frozen this refugee program. And then comes another executive action where he creates an exemption. Well, who does he create an exemption for? Not those Afghans, not people who have waited years in the process, but actually a carve out for white South Africans, for Afrikaners. The immediate questions afterwards were why? And also, does this represent something broader with the administration's approach to South Africa, but also for the president's own motivations?
During Trump's first term, I was a national race reporter then, and I know a lot of the reporting around then was built around this idea that Trump's political identity was in part built on sort of this idea that he was going to be the one to sort of like save the forgotten or the slipping, the fading white man, right? It was a real sort of identity politics push, and where it's like, there's all these things that are coming, and then they want all these immigrants, they want to basically like replace you, right? There were all these sort of alt-right figures who were strong supporters of Trump, who embraced these conspiracies about replacement theory and things like that. For me, it was just almost like a light went off that this sort of makes sense, when you look at that political identity, that the beginning, some of the beginnings of his political identity, this is sort of the type of thing that appeals to that, right? Appeals to those who are concerned about we're bringing into this country and what it's doing to the demographics and the demographic shift. And in some ways, it harkens back to some of the eras of the mid 20th century in America, where where immigration policy was carefully tailored around race and who gets in, whether excluding Chinese people, excluding certain races, and basically allowing only certain races to come in. So I thought about that right away, and I'm curious, how you've seen on the ground that narrative. Has that been a narrative that you think has sort of taken hold in terms of this policy?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to, especially critics of this administration, when people hear the president say, that he wants to make America great again and sort of protect that old America, they see it as synonymous as protecting, white America as well. You can see the parallels of that, like in actual real, this coming to fruition with this move here. We found that as these Afrikaner lobbyists were coming to Washington, you had people you had the president's own aides meeting with them. And our reporting showed, you picked this up, that they were asking about the impact of these post-apartheid policies in South Africa. Are there quotas? Are you facing job discrimination? Are you getting your land seized? What have you? And you can just see the messaging sort of align with now how they've approached DEI programs and diversity programs in the United States, almost viewing the post-apartheid policies and sort of the complaints, from the Afrikaner groups, many of which have been proved to not have evidence. But the complaints that white people are being persecuted in South Africa because of these diversity policies, it shows the president's willingness to uh, uh, again try to be a protector for not just white America but white people overseas, to also lean into conspiracy theories as well and amplify them.
It's a genocide. White farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
And it shows just an upending of a program that really was at the center of America's role as a sanctuary for the vulnerable all around the world as well.
And I think it's also important to note what the Deputy Secretary of State said when the first Afrikaner refugees arrived.
Some of the criteria are making sure that refugees did not pose any challenge to our national security and that they could be assimilated easily into our country.
That kind of tells us, right, where the administration sort of sees these Afrikaners fitting in and maybe gives some sense of why they carved out this exception, I think.
Well, 100%. It's saying essentially we believe that these folks belong in America.
Yeah.
And, those other populations, those other nationalities that I mentioned, do not. It almost indicates a cultural affinity that this administration has for this group of people, rather than those other refugees who, by the way, have been resettling in the United States now for decades. And it's also just worth noting again, it's not usual that you have the administration go to an airport and welcome refugees, right? This wasn't just like a policy move that was sort of, tucked under while the president went and traveled overseas. They went and had an event to welcome these Afrikaners from South Africa.
But I want you all to know that you are really welcome here and that we respect what you have had to deal with these last few years.
The main thing that Trump has been putting out there, espousing, two main things. One is that there's mass killings, and two, there are farm, confiscation, that they're having their land confiscated. So I'll talk a little bit about that, from what I've seen on the ground in South Africa. Just first to state it bluntly, like there are no mass killings of white people, be it on farms or otherwise, in South Africa. And there is no confiscation of land. Apartheid ended in 1994. Nelson Mandela, who was, obviously the president of South Africa, who became the first democratic president of South Africa, he sort of went out of his way to not do these more aggressive things that some people within sort of the movement, the movement against apartheid wanted, which was sort of a more aggressive redistribution of wealth, redistribution of land, and doing things more aggressively. He wanted to sort of build a nation, build this rainbow nation is what they call it, right? So he largely let white people sort of keep the power and the resources and the wealth that they had. There was no forced, taking away things. But what they did do, the government realized that, yes, we do need to do something about this land disparity, right? Because almost all the land is owned by white people. So they did this program called willing buyer, willing seller, meaning the governments tried to sort of convince white landowners to, hey, can you sell the land so we can distribute it to? And some of that happened, not on a large scale. There was some sort of like compensation that was given to Black people that, who could get land as well. And so there has been some redistribution, but it hasn't been wholesale redistribution. So when you look at today, if you just look at white farmers alone, if you just put together all of their farms make up half of the country. So half of South Africa is white-owned farms, essentially, even though the white population is only 7%. So it shows you how that disparity still exists, right? And what the government did do that really caught Trump's eye this year was the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. He signed into law a measure that would allow the government to take land without providing compensation to the owners. Now, on its face, it sounds scary, but there's lots of caveats and lots of sort of nuance to it. And the intent of it, as the government states, is to use it as a way to like take land that when it's in the public interest. So it could be public interest, could be building a road. Public interest could be land is lying fallow, no one's doing anything with it. We need that into production, so we're going to take it and distribute it to farmers. So what most experts say is the intent of that's going to be used when you have a lot of land where the owners left it there, nothing's happening, it's overgrown, it's weeds, and they're not doing anything with it. Then the government could go in and sort of try to take that land. But even if they wanted to do that, it's still subject to judicial review. It has to go to the courts, and the courts ultimately have to decide. Like the landowner can challenge it. There's not really an expectation that it's going to be this tool that's going to dispossess a lot of Afrikaners. That's the land part. And then as far as the killings, so the killings, the police data do not show that there are mass killings of white people on farms. Now, there have been killings, no doubt, but South Africa is a violent place in general. The murder rate is upwards of 45 murders per 100,000 people. And just to put that in perspective, it's 6 per 100,000 in the US. But if you look at these killings, most of the victims of killings are, in the country that's 80% Black, most of the victims of killings are Black. So, yes, white people living on farms, which are rural areas, which tend to be more vulnerable, are not as easy for the police to get to. Yes, they do face vulnerabilities living in a rural area. Farmers also, they tend to keep a lot of cash. They tend to be, wealthy in the areas where they live, because all around them you'll have, smaller Black settlements that are poor. So yes, they are targets in that sense that, you have wealthy people living on land where they tend to keep a lot of cash. And so people will come and rob them. White farmers who were killed, we're talking like probably less than 50 or so over the past 5 years. And that's not to downplay. Obviously, a murder is a murder, and it's a bad thing. But where you'll see a lot of Afrikaners say that they are being persecuted, they are being targeted, is some of the killings have involved very sort of brutal circumstances. Some of them have involved torture. And so what their argument is that, if you want to just rob me, and even if you want to just kill me, you can shoot me and kill me and rob me. But why are you torturing people? And there's a feeling that it's to send this message that you don't belong here anymore. You're on our land, that you're on stolen land. And so there's this sentiment and this feeling among some Afrikaners that they really are targeted, and that the brutality of these crimes is what makes them targeted and persecuted.
Two things kind of stick out to me after hearing that the reporting from you, John. And that's one, you mentioned a fear amongst Afrikaners in South Africa, and that fits right into the Trump playbook. He is so good at tapping into people's fear. The other thing is just a lot of all the facts and the reporting that you said. It's none of that is included in the president's statements dating back to the first term when it comes to South Africa. Fox News was running programs with with leaders of Afrikaner groups, lobbying groups. And this was limited to social media for the most part. He did direct his State Department to investigate what he described as land seizures and mass killings against Afrikaners in the first term. There were still people in that administration that would limit impulses and sort of fringe theories and ideas to a social media rant. And those people aren't around anymore. They've been replaced with loyalists. And as a result, these fringe ideas now are not limited to social media. They're going to policy at this point. I was told that really what ignited this in the first term was the president was having conversations with different people outside of government while playing golf, including with the renowned South African golfer Gary Player, and who officials told us, including John Bolton, that the president said that he heard about this struggle that Afrikaners were experiencing from someone like Gary Player.
And what I was told by one of the Afrikaner activists who went and lobbied at the White House this year, he said he's been lobbying in the U.S. for more than a decade, right? So he's been talking about South Africa, and he usually goes there and he gets South Africa, who cares? But he said this time there was just a lot of interest in South Africa, so there's a lot of people within the administration, beyond obviously the obvious South Africans we think about. Elon Musk and Gary Player, Trump's good friend, because everyone always asks me, so what role does Elon Musk play in this? So I'd be interested to hear your report. My reporting that people that I've talked to said they don't really know. I haven't gotten a clear answer, like in terms of like the actual policy, but a lot of people suspect he's not necessarily the one driving the, sort of take this specific action against South Africa, but he's very good at amplifying, right? He's very good at going on X, his social media site. And if there's anything, like when Trump first talked about that land bill, that land seizure bill that I talked about, when Trump first mentioned that, like, Elon Musk goes out there and tweets about South Africa having openly racist laws, right? He's tweeted many times about white genocide. There are some politicians in South Africa who are very provocative and sing songs, sing these historic struggle songs that call for the killing of farmers. He's more than happy to tweet them out and put them out front and center, and make them, So to me, Elon Musk has really been an amplifier of all this.
Yeah, Elon's not really the spark. He might have poured fuel on this, but he's the reporting doesn't show that he's the seed of this. Right now, I do think having somebody that has pushed these conspiracy theories and Elon Musk so close to the president now. In fact, he made another false claim about this and posted about South Africa on social media around the time Trump signed his initial executive order cutting off foreign aid to South Africa as well. So there's a convergence of factors. This is definitely a story where white grievance is a motivation and the politics of white grievance. It also comes at a time where the United States and where this administration have also taken a critical approach to South Africa for different reasons. This is also a country that broke with the United States in its approach to Israel's war in Gaza as well. And that has angered many of the national security officials here in DC. There are other foreign policy concerns as well about where South Africa might be going and, whether or not it's inching closer to non-U.S. allies, even adversaries. So you have this convergence of those who actually, take an opposing view of South Africa's direction when it comes to foreign policy. Those in the administration who feel that South Africa represents an easy sort of target as the administration looks for examples to attack diversity programs. And also a president who is in many ways somebody who has risen in the world of U.S. politics by tapping into white fear and white grievance as well. All of that coming to fruition around reshaping this program, this immigration program, to focus on a white minority in South Africa.
It'd be interesting to see sort of where it all goes from here, because we have a big moment coming up this week where President Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's president, is going to be coming to the White House to visit Trump. These sit downs where they sit there in the White House, they've now become like must see TV after what happened with President Zelensky of Ukraine. We all want to like watch and kind of predict what happens. And then sort of my understanding is that South Africa's president, he's going to try to sort of reset the relationship, is his hope, that he's going to stand firm on his contention that there is no genocide going on. So it'll be interesting to see how Trump responds to that. And there's also an expectation among the South African side that Elon Musk will actually be present for the meeting. So they're expecting that. And so I think it'll be a very big moment.
It'll be really interesting to see what approach Ramaphosa takes, in that meeting, especially if it's not just Trump in the meeting, but also Elon.
Yeah.